Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to tonight's live stream. The transfer window's been open for a few days now, and things are heating up. Not so much on a Chelsea front, but a lot of deals already going through. Darwin Núñez joining Liverpool for a club record fee. Erling Haaland obviously confirmed to Man United. Spurs making moves in the market as well. Basuma and Perisic both done deals now as well. And from a Chelsea perspective, we've got a lot of work to do. A lot of business needs to be done. Yes, we're slightly on the back foot. Due to the sanctions, we haven't been able to have as many negotiations or get as advanced with things as other clubs have been able to do so in this time. But, there's plenty to discuss. Players we're linked with, rumours doing the rounds. I'm delighted to be joined by Oli to go through some of this, give our thoughts on the players who've been linked with. Mate, great to have you as always. Are you concerned by the lack of action at Chelsea so far? I mean, for me personally, I'm okay with it at the moment. Yes, it's frustrating to see other teams that are going to potentially challenge you and you're competing with going out, spending money, getting business done early. But for me, we've had a lot to contend with, a lot to deal with. And as long as signings, in my opinion, are done before pre-season begins, then I feel all right about it. But it's hard not to get a little bit frustrated when you see other clubs doing business. Do you kind of feel the same?
Yeah, well, first of all, just want to say it's great to be here. But yeah, I agree. Sometimes it can feel a little bit frustrating, especially because of, the situation we've been in. We physically couldn't sign players, for example. And now that the sort of the veil's been lifted of the sanctions and the new owners have come in and everything, you would expect, I suppose, to a certain degree, you might expect like a bit of an explosion, like a rocket out of the gate sort of type thing. However, I'm not really quite sure that that's going to be the case. I'm not really that surprised we haven't done that much yet. Like we said, the window for us has only been open for a few days. The sanctions have only been off for like a few weeks. So it's more of like I was expecting it to be kind of a bit of a slow start, especially versus some of the other teams in the Premier League, because they've had months to, probe agents, sort deals out behind closed doors, things like that. And Chelsea literally couldn't do any of that. So we're sort of starting from scratch. But I like that Bowley and Co are taking their time.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to rush as well. And I think people don't realise that, we're talking about we're talking about large sums of money, and we're talking about negotiations, not only between clubs, but, negotiation between agents, players to get the right wages, because you don't want to end up in a situation kind of like we've been in the past, where we're offering ridiculous wages to players just to kind of get them to sign. More often than not, it doesn't work out. And now, as we've experienced, we can't get rid of them because they won't get the wage they've got here anywhere else. So it's important that, we do take our time with it, however frustrating it must be. But it is a really, really important window because there's so many areas of the pitch that need addressing. The squad needs, it does need a bit of a rebuild, as Tuchel said, an overhaul. It's not all going to happen in one window. We need to accept that. But what we can't afford to do is get left behind or miss out on players to other teams that we've been linked with because we've been indecisive and not quick enough. But mate, let's kick things off then. Jules Kounde, obviously we should have done it. We should have done it last year. For me, that was a mistake not to get that done. It's another one doing the rounds as it always does. It's still not done yet. I'm not really sure why this deal isn't done, to be honest. But obviously last night coming out, that Kounde obviously played at right back for France in the Nations League, but he required he picked up a bit of an injury, required a surgery on that. But yeah, I mean, absolute Chelsea via Nassar Cancella. Chelsea still on course to sign Jules Kounde. Surgery is minor, hopes to make pre-season. Both Chelsea and Sevilla were aware of that situation. I suppose that's a good thing. And the procedures anticipated to keep Kounde out for around 4 weeks. He is believed to have suffered a fairly common pelvis issue. There's no anticipation that it will impact any potential transfer. By all accounts there, Oli, doesn't seem like too much to worry about. But I mean, would you have any concerns about signing Kounde at all? Or do you just think this is just kind of a little bit of a minor setback, which we could do without?
No, none at all. I have absolutely no hesitations about this one. Mainly for the fact that it's quite a small routine procedure. He'd be back in time for pre-season anyway. We've signed players before when they've not been fully fit. I don't know if you remember, Chilwell took like 3 medicals to sign him because he was injured at the time. And Personally, I think it's pretty routine for what I've seen. You can see now as well the reason why Chelsea haven't actually gone in for him straight away. I mean,
Yeah.
it casts a lot of context onto that situation because we weren't able to sign him last summer, but because we want to get it right this summer, we've taken a minute, and also if he gets injured during all these Nations League games, then and we've signed him before then we've got an asset that we've paid 50-60 million for that we can't even play. So it's important getting this out of the way first before Chelsea actually sign him. I think that's is actually a smart, prudent move. I've heard in some cases it might even bring the fee down, but I wouldn't hold my breath about that.
Yeah, I saw that thing as well about getting the fee down. I think that's going to be unlikely. Sevilla obviously losing Diego Carlos as well, another one of their centre halves to Aston Villa. So, I mean, that's believed not to really have much of an impact on the deal. It might hold things up slightly, but obviously Chelsea were aware of this, so it's not something that's come out of the blues. I think that's okay. And for the age that he's at, the fact that he is versatile as well, he's young, he's a French international, there is resale value there. So, those are things that we have to take into account when spending money on a player. I mean, to get kind of top quality defenders, you're going to struggle to spend any less than 50-60 million pounds. Do you think that's a fair price?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there was at one point there was talk of about 70 odd million for him, and I thought that sounded like a bit much. But you always get a bit confused as well. At least I do, between sort of the pound figure and the euros figure. I think it's somewhere around 55 million pounds. Would be about it. And I reckon that's probably about right in this sort of slightly inflated market that we've got going on for players now. I don't think that's too bad. That's probably the equivalent of us getting a 30 odd million pound transfer about 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with it. And it's one that we need to get done sooner or later, just to get that first one in. Because, I mean, Ollie, do you think we need two centre-backs? I mean, I'm seeing people saying that maybe we don't need two centre-backs because we've got kind of Levi Colwill emerging. I mean, that's big pressure to put on him. I personally feel he'd benefit from another loan, or if Malang Sarr were to leave, then he could take that place in the squad and kind of play a bit part role. Other names doing the rounds then, obviously, I'll take that off the screen now. Kounde's the main one, but there are other ones as well. The likes of Gvardiol, the Ligt we've been linked with, and Kalidou Koulibaly as well. Which ones... Who excites you out of that? I think Gvardiol at 20 years of age, it's going to be a lot of money to get him out of Leipzig, and I'm not sure he's got quite enough experience yet, perhaps, to come to the Premier League. It might be a little bit too soon for him. The Ligt, again, very expensive, but there's potential there, possibly. I think he's a great player. Things haven't gone so well at Juve, but the one that excites me the most is Koulibaly. We're losing a lot of experience in the back line. He's someone that wouldn't necessarily block development paths of younger centre-backs, i.e., Colwill, and it would add some much needed experience to the back line, wouldn't cost a fortune, wouldn't be huge wages, and he'd have influence in the dressing room. Maybe not instantly, but he would kind of be, he would have that, he would command that leadership. He's got that. We've seen it at Napoli, see it for Senegal national team. This is kind of one that excites me. It's one that, probably should have happened maybe 5-6 years ago. He's a player that's always linked to come to the Premier League, and it never happens. But maybe this summer it could. Would you be a fan of that?
Yeah, I would. I think when you sort of you give those sort of three names, you've got Gvardiol, you've got De Ligt, and you've got Koulibaly. Gvardiol is sort of like the unknown option, and then De Ligt is probably like the superstar option, and Koulibaly is probably the sensible option, just for the fee, the wages, the leadership, things like that you're going to get, the intangible stuff that you get from bringing in someone like him into the team. You got to remember we're losing a lot of experience, like you say. Rudiger and Christensen are both leaving, so we need someone who's going to fill that gap. So I think De Ligt could probably come in and play a role a bit like Christensen does. Sort of at that sort of younger but quite mature centre back. But Koulibaly could come in and do the job that Rudiger did, which is arguably a more necessary job, especially when our only other sort of senior centre back is Thiago Silva. We're already signing quite a young centre-back in Jules Kounde, most likely. So it's probably the sensible option. I'd be quite excited for it, I must say.
Yeah, and I would be as well. Matt, I'm just going to bring a few stats. I'm just going to bring this little graph up on the screen. There's a great guy on Twitter called Chelsea Database who puts together all these great stats. So do check him out. It's just kind of a comparison of the two centre-backs we've got, basically, in Silva and Chalobah. And then obviously Koulibaly, De Ligt, Kounde, Gvardiol, and Colwill. Obviously, I know stats are great. But they're not they're kind of like, it's hard to compare these because obviously these guys play in different leagues, different systems, etc. But it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what they're quite good at. I mean, obviously De Ligt, no errors leading to a shot, doesn't get dribbled past that often either, which is good as a defender. Koulibaly pretty solid across the board. I mean, Oli, in a centre back, what sort of things are you looking for mainly? Obviously, he needs to be able to defend well, but I guess ball recoveries, interceptions, low errors as well are kind of all crucial things.
Yeah, I think the intangible one is leadership. I think you really need someone at the back who's going to help be able to organise things right at the back. I think the likes of Koulibaly and Thiago Silva are the best on that list for that. Interestingly as well, I think probably a more underrated part of the game for a centre back these days is the passing game.
Yeah.
We know Rudiger was an excellent passer of the ball, and often he was the one who was switching long diagonals for us to be able to get, bring Reece James into space and things like that on the right hand side. So it's quite important to have someone who can ping those balls around. I'm not sure necessarily who out of that list is the best passer of the ball, but I would wager based on Tuchel's systems and the kind of centre backs he likes, whoever we bring in will be a decent passer of the ball.
Yeah, no, for sure. And do you think as well? I mean, there's a lot of talk about, are we going to stick with the back three? We're going to go back four. We might see back four a bit more this season. Maybe depends on if a defensive midfield player does come in, that could have a big bearing on that. Do you think that comes into the thinking when we're looking at the centre backs this summer? Players that can be just as good as in a three as in a four. I mean, Kounde can be good in a three and a four. I think De Ligt would be the same, and I think Koulibaly could well be the same as well. So, how important for that versatility for you is? That's got to be up there as well. We can't have someone that's kind of good in a three but not so good in a four. We need someone comfortable kind of across both systems.
Yeah, it's vital, isn't it? It's like you've got to have someone who's versatile, especially in a system like Tuchel's, where you're playing a different formation sometimes every week. This week you're playing a back three, next week you're playing a back four, next week you're playing a three, but you're the left-sided centre back who needs to bomb forward and make part of a three or whatever. So it's really important to have that versatility. And I think Tuchel can probably coach that. I have good faith in him that he'd be able to sort of, tell the players what he needs from them. But having a natural sort of ability to be able to fit in any system is sort of almost like a master lock in defense. That's exactly what we want. We want someone who's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. And in a sense, it's something that we might be slightly losing in Azpilicueta if he does decide to leave in the end. He was a very versatile player, and Tuchel likes his versatile players. So I imagine any centre back we bring in will be able to do both systems comfortably.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, obviously, it's going to be Kounde. We're just waiting for that announcement. But the other one's interesting. You look at the ages. Kounde is obviously 23. Chalobah's 22. Then we got Colwell, who's obviously 19, but like Malang Sarr's not that old. He's not good enough, really. You look at it. If we were, for example, to try and get a De Ligt, it's 22 years old. I'm not saying that's bad as such, but you end up with a very young back line. You've got Thiago Silva that's 37, and everyone else is under 23.
It's a risk, isn't it?
Is that a concern? Would that be a concern to you? I mean, I wouldn't say no to De Ligt necessarily, but I think Koulibaly for a couple of years, 2-3 years, could be much better. And De Ligt then would still only be 25. He'd be more developed, and there's still a chance to get him.
Yeah, that's true. And that there's every option that would be the better way to go. It's really an interesting choice when you look at it because, like you say, Koulibaly's got the leadership, and he sort of is a bit of a stopgap player who would do a really good job for us. The thing with De Ligt, I suppose, is that in terms of sort of maturity, you got to remember he's been playing beside Chiellini and Bonucci. So he's playing with some of the best and oldest and most experienced centre backs in the world. Something that would only be mirrored by Thiago Silva. And so that's something that's interesting to see as well, is that dynamic could probably quite easily be replicated at Chelsea. And we could see De Ligt, performing as well as he does for Juve for us.
Yeah, no, it's a possibility. And I think also another thing to remember is that Thiago Silva played a lot last season. He'd be 38 in September. I think it's unrealistic, as good as he is, to expect him to play that volume of games again next season and be as consistent every week. I think we need to find a balance where we don't actually need to play him every week.
Yeah, a bit more like I guess Lampard did, where he was trying to rest him a little bit more. We had so many injuries and things like that in the last season and inconsistencies and the like, that eventually Silva ended up being really our only centre back that we could comfortably rely on. And and Rudiger, but of course towards the end he decided to leave. So this season, because we're having a big sort of rethink of the defense, we probably do want a system in which he can play a good role, but maybe not a constant one. Because, like you say, eventually his body will just give up, and it's age. It happens to all of us, and especially athletes.
Yeah,
So I
no,
really, I hope he's got one more year with us. I don't know if he'll extend another one. Every year we seem to say, this could be his last year, and then he extends again, and he's still really good every year. So I don't know. He could easily play until he's 40, in my opinion, but it just depends who for.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to his season. He's definitely be here for next season, though. And yeah, for me, my two preferences would be obviously Kounde and Koulibaly. The Ligt, I wouldn't be totally against the Ligt, but another interesting one potentially, and it kind of has permutations maybe with the Romelu Lukaku deal as well. As I'll just bring it up now on the screen. Milan Skriniar, 27 years of age, centre back at Inter Milan. Now, Ben Jacobs tweeting out today that Skriniar is very much for sale. Inter say they want £69 million. PSG have offered 42 million and are expected to go back with improved offer. They're prepared to pay around 55, including add-ons, but see Inter's valuations too high. Chelsea and Spurs also interested. No offer from either yet. Inter expect to keep Lautaro Martinez and Bastoni and may be forced to lower their asking price on Skriniar, especially if Dybala and Lukaku arrive. Skriniar wants his future resolved by early July. Now, Oli, Skriniar, you a fan of his? I think he's a good defender. I wouldn't be against him joining either. 27 years of age, good in a back three, can also play in a four. He's got Champions League experience. He's got experience of playing with top players. Obviously, that price is ridiculous. Chelsea aren't going to pay 80 million euros for Skriniar. But if we could perhaps involve him some way in part of the Lukaku deal, would you be for that?
Yeah, I think I would be. I think he's almost a bit like a hybrid between the Koulibaly option and the De Ligt option. Not in the sort of player he is, but in the sort of the age and experience and things like that. He offers something a little bit more. I haven't seen him play a huge amount. He's a decent, no nonsense centre back. You don't get to be playing for Inter Milan. Be one of the first names on the team sheet for them every season without being a decent player. I'd be all for it, especially if that means if there's a deal somehow to make Romelu Lukaku go the other way. If that reduces fees for this or that, or I don't know. I could certainly see it as an option, although I personally think he'll probably end up at PSG.
Yeah, I could imagine. I would see the same now. Chelsea, for me, aren't going to pay that money outright for him. Potentially, we can get a swap deal. I'd be for that. But yeah, I think Skriniar is one of those where good player. But Bastoni as well. I mean, I don't know if Chelsea are interested in Bastoni. Spurs seem to have more interest. Would Bastoni be someone that would interest you also?
Not seen him play that much, to be honest.
Yeah.
But like he gets a lot of hype from people on the internet, so he must be half decent. But I think he's probably more likely to go to somewhere like a Spurs or an Arsenal, really, than Chelsea. Only because again, he's another quite young centre back. If we're already, if we've got all our eggs in the Kounde basket.
We just need one more after that.
Yeah, we're just going to need one more player in to sort of play in the back line. So I think the smart play would probably be to go for a more experienced head, and I think that probably means Kounde plus whoever else comes in who's probably over sort of 27, 28 years old, if not Koulibaly who's over 30.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. And just whilst we're on the back line, just another one on income, and kind of an interesting one that's sort of emerged in the last couple of days. Simon Phillips tweeting out that a second strong source of his confirming Chelsea's interest in Wolves left back Ryan Ait-Nouri to replace Marcos Alonso, who wants to join Barcelona. I don't know an awful lot about Ait-Nouri. I know he came in from Rennes, had a good reputation in France. I think he's done fairly well for Wolves. We're always crying out for Chelsea to do more smart business in the transfer market, kind of recruit more from within the Premier League, etc. Something about this is appealing to me. Like, I think he's got potential. I do quite like it. What are your thoughts on it? Obviously, we're a long way from any potential transfer going through, but like, would you be a fan of this one?
I see it as well. I think it could be a really, really good, smart deal. I know a little bit about Ait-Nouri just because I saw a thing about him this morning and decided to have a bit of a read up.
Yeah.
He's a decent, he's a really good dribbler of the ball. Very good at sort of moving the ball, progressing the ball up the pitch. I think he's one of the highest in the league statistics wise for progressive carries. He likes a shot on target. He likes a shot on goal, which is what we need from our wing backs because they're quite important to the attacking function when we're playing a back three. I see this as a really good backup option. Either he's capable enough to play there, to play wing back for the first team all the time, and he gives Chilwell a good run for his money if he's not quite fit enough, or if Chilwell comes back and he's doing a pretty good job, then he's going to be a very decent second string player. I don't think he'd cost the world either. I think he only signed for Wolves for about 10 million, so we'd probably only need to pay about 20. Um, I think there's a player there. I'd be quite excited to see that one. It's a nice budget option because there seems to be quite an overabundance of wing backs at the moment. You've got the likes of Cucurella, Sosa, and Raum all going somewhere this summer, and this might be an interesting under the radar choice.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, we need someone who we almost need two first choices or like a first choice and like a 1.5 choice, as it were. In terms of the fact that like Chilwell's going to take time to get back up to speed again. We're planning on going deep in a lot of competitions. We're going to play a lot of games. It's going to be injuries. It's going to be suspensions. We've got 5 subs next season as well. That means more rotation for players as well. Like anyone coming in for that left back backup slot or right-sided backup slot, they're going to play a lot of minutes. So I think it's important that we actually get someone who is almost a first choice, really, because they're going to get the required minutes they need. I mean, just on those 2 names you mentioned in Sosa and Raum, would you be obviously great reputations in the Bundesliga? Raum actually, ironically, is I think attracting a bit of interest in Manchester City as well. Would you rather Ait-Nouri over any of those 2, or do you think Sosa and Raum, either of those, would actually end up being better than Ait-Nouri?
It's hard to tell, isn't it? Because they're all young players. They're all excellent at what they do. You can't take anything away from them. The only thing you can say about Ait-Nouri that Sosa and Ram haven't got is PL experience, of course. And that's a really important factor. We've signed a lot of players from the Bundesliga in the last few years, and a lot of them have come to the Premier League for other teams as well. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the likes of Jadon Sancho. We've got Werner, Havertz, players that take a little minute to actually bed into the league. And we don't want that. We want players who are ready now. We've had enough of that. So I would personally say Ait-Nouri is a better choice in that regard. Sosa and Raum, from what I read, seem to have a higher ceiling, I would imagine. But I don't think we could go far wrong with him as a good choice.
No, mate, I 100% agree. And just kind of to round out at the back then, in terms of outgoings, Marcos Alonso has made it very clear that he wants to leave Chelsea. He's agreed personal terms with Barcelona. Barca are kind of just waiting for a final price from Chelsea. I think initially, Marino is trying to get like 20 million euros. I think that's a little bit steep. 1 year left on his contract. He's over 30. Barcelona are in financial difficulties. Alonso doesn't want to be there. It could be one of those where we just need to start taking a bit of a hit on players just to get them off the books. I don't think people are going to be particularly sad about Alonso leaving. I think he's done well for the club, particularly going forward. He's very good. Defensively, not so good. It's kind of the right time for both parties now, isn't it, to part ways?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if Alonso's leaving, we definitely need to bring someone back in. And Emerson at left wing back is probably not a great desirable choice, really. So, I think it's probably best for all parties. Alonso's given a lot of his career to Chelsea. You got to say fair to him. He's a warrior. Every season for however many years people have wanted him out, he stayed. He's performed anyway. So you've got to give him the credit for that. But I think it's about time now that it's ready for him to go back to Spain, go back to his homeland.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just last thing then, mate. Azpilicueta, again, another one. He's got a deal on the table from Barcelona. I think he'd like to go. Chelsea have got an option on him, which is automatically triggered because of how many games he played last season. For me, with Aspie, I'm happy for him to leave. He's earned the right to decide what he wants to do for the service he's given to the club. However, what I would say is I would try and hold back on making that call until any defensive reinforcements actually arrive, because at the moment we're low on numbers and we're very low on leaders and experience. So if if Kounde comes in, which he should do, and another defender comes in, then I'm happy for Aspie to leave. But I wouldn't be happy with Aspie being let go now with no one else coming in. Do you share those thoughts?
Yeah, from a business perspective as well, it doesn't make much sense because, obviously, if we let Aspie go, even say it's for, I don't know, 10 million or something like that, then any club that we're negotiating with knows we've got 10 million extra in the bank. They know we've got a whole load of wages that have been freed up. They're going to be saying, come on, cough it up. We want a little bit more money. And so it's certainly probably a smart idea. It always seems to be a smarter idea to do incomings rather than outgoings first, if you can afford it as a football club. Like you say, Aspie's earned the right to go wherever he wants. He's been a brilliant captain, brilliant servant for the club. Really, really enjoyed having him at Chelsea.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Just briefly, this come up this afternoon. Just thought I'd cover it. Obviously, goalkeepers. We've got Edouard Mendy. Kepa who I think is a great goalkeeper. It's not financially viable to have someone on his wages as a number 2 choice just sitting on the bench most weeks. We need to sell him, get what we can for him. Firstly, though, mate, Gabriel Slonina from Chicago Fire, 18 years of age. That's going to be done hopefully quite soon. I think we've beaten Real Madrid to his signature. One for the future, someone that will probably stay on loan for the rest of the MLS season, then probably go out on a couple of loans until he might come back to Chelsea maybe in his early 20s. Very much one for the future. I don't think anyone really knows much about him, but I mean, something I guess worth doing. If Real Madrid are looking at him and Chelsea are looking at him, then he must have something about him. And any comments on that deal?
Yeah, it seems like a decent enough player. I think it's always hard to tell. There's people saying that he's got the attributes and the skills and the things like that to be an excellent goalkeeper indeed. From what I can tell, it seems that he has a bit of a higher ceiling than both Baxter and Cummings. So if we do sign him, it probably means at least one of them is going as well as Kepa at some point. So yeah, I could see it. I wouldn't mind it at all. I think it's about a £10 million transfer. I think roughly something like that. I could certainly see it happening, and I think it's exactly, especially it has a bit more credence to it because the fact he's an MLS player, we've got American owners. I could see us doing a little bit more smart business like this, and I wouldn't be upset about it at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, obviously, this other guy, Lazio goalkeeper Thomas Strakosha, he's now apparently attracting interest. He's available on a free transfer, and Chelsea are considering him as one of the options, but only in case Kepa will leave the club this summer. So that very much from Fabrizio sounds like there's no guarantees that Kepa will leave this summer. I mean, Oli, do you think it's vital that Kepa does leave? I mean, not only from a financial perspective, but for his own career as well, with it being a World Cup year, a World Cup season, he'll want to be in that Spanish squad. It's vital that he's playing first team football. I mean, do you think we'll struggle to get rid of it?
Maybe. It's hard to know because you never know when someone wants to take a punt on someone who they think is, could be, there's a player in there for sure in Kepa. Kepa's not a bad goalkeeper. He had a very, very, very poor season under Frank Lampard, and he's been suffering from that ever since. But he's actually come back into the team a little bit under Tuchel. He's done all right. Yeah, he's had a few blemishes, and you can say what you want about him missing a penalty in the final. Not his job, in my opinion. But I think if he goes, he goes, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. He'll go eventually. We all know he will. It's probably not really worked out for him as it goes at Chelsea. But I don't think he gets a bit of a bad rep. He doesn't get quite as much credit as he deserves. He gets a bit more stick, in my opinion. But yeah, I could certainly see him leaving this summer if an appropriate offer came in. But I don't think Chelsea would. He's got a long contract on him, so I don't see. It would have to be a good offer, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, and on this Strakosha, I mean, available on a free transfer, I guess as a number 2 goalkeeper, that is a hard position to fill that. And if someone's prepared, if we can get someone on a free that's happy to be a second choice and is a half decent goalkeeper, I think again that's kind of smart business and would make sense. I think a number 2 goalkeeper is one of the hardest positions to actually fill, really, because you've got to find someone that's kind of good enough to step in and do a job, but then someone that's also equally happy to accept that they're not going to play very much football.
And that's why you need the younger players to do it. Players like Slonina, who we're linked with, also any of the youth players we've got, Baxter and Cumming both had excellent loans. I don't know if they'll come back into the squad, at least as a third team option, a third choice option. So you never know. There could be a few moves at goalkeeper, if not this summer, certainly next summer.
Yeah, no, for sure, mate. Let's move into the exciting stuff then, the attacking end of the pitch. Well-documented issues up there. Romelu Lukaku. Won't spend too much time on that. Trying to get a move back to Inter Milan, that's going to be very much dependent on kind of what they can afford and us kind of reaching an agreement there. Of loan fee. I've latest think maybe a 2-year loan deal potentially with an option to buy. It's got to be an option or an obligation to buy in that deal somewhere. But just briefly, Ollie, I mean, how important is it that he leaves the club this summer? Because I think it's got to the point now where it's kind of beyond repair, this relationship, and it just wouldn't be good if he was still here come the start of pre-season or the start of the season. It's just one of those where it's gone horribly wrong. We kind of just have to take it on the chin, and whatever we can do, we just need to move him on, because it's clear that he just doesn't want to be here. I don't think he ever actually wanted to come back in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's not worked out for him. And I think a lot of the Chelsea fans now are just very jaded about the Lukaku situation. Like there was that one. It's an old prime minister or an old politician said to Neville Chamberlain, I think at the time, just before he resigned. He said, for God's sake, man, just go. And that's kind of how we feel.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us about Lukaku. Like we're just kind of ready for him to leave. He doesn't want to put the effort in. Like we just don't care. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like whatever happens, okay, fine. If we lose money on him, fine. If he goes out on loan and scores 1 million goals and then signs back for Inter, fine. Because he clearly wasn't going to do it for us.
Yeah, no, I think it's not much to be said. I think he's one of those that is going to drag on towards the end of the window. I can't see there being a quick resolution to this one. But in terms of forward players, let's start with outgoings. Obviously, players are going to have to move out before others can come in, and it very much seems to be one or two of Werner, Ziyech, and Pulisic that seem to be the guys that would be prepared to be sold and moved on. Pulisic is it's got 2 years left on his contract. It's in a report in the Athletic saying that it's kind of coming to a crunch point now where Chelsea are going to either look to sell him or he'll get a new contract. I can understand his market value to the new owners. American market still very much untapped for Chelsea. Kind of having the poster boy of American soccer, as it were, at the club can be a useful marketing tool. But in terms of on the pitch, there's clear ability there. 23 years of age, still very young. But like with a lot of these forwards, we haven't seen it on a consistent basis. And it's coming to that crunch time for Pulisic now where I would keep him this summer personally. But if he has another season like he's had this season or like he's had throughout his time at Chelsea, I think it would be very much time to move on. But in terms of out of those three, I'd say Werner and Ziyech would be more likely to move on. Would you be more inclined to keep Pulisic out of those three?
I would actually, yeah. For the same reasons you said. He's clearly got value to the owners. There's still definitely a player in there. I think people are really, really harsh on Pulisic because he misses a lot of chances. He does get in the situations and the positions to miss those chances in the first place. Clearly, he's not that consistent a finisher. That has been something that's plagued all our forwards this season. Although I'm not really sure why people single him out in particular. He's still really young, still got bags of talent. Clearly. I would definitely keep him this summer. For me, there's no doubt. I think if you're going to move anyone on, it's probably more likely to be Werner than Ziyech. Just on the basis that it's not really worked out for Werner. And I think he'd probably be angling for a move away, while Ziyech, I think it probably has worked, and he plays quite a good part role in the team, sort of like a bit like Pedro did for us towards the end of his work before he left us, where he was sort of playing a little bit, and he always sort of seemed to produce quality when he played. And Ziyech seems a lot like that as well. And he's an excellent squad player to have. So I would keep him around. Werner, I think the thing with Werner is he probably isn't that. He's not that good for the system we play. He creates a lot of space, and you can't deny that. But he's only really good against a ridiculously high line, which is they play a lot in the Bundesliga, which is obviously why he did so well there, and which is why I've seen a few things about him angling for a move back. So. I would be a little bit sad if he left because I quite like him as a person, but as a footballer, I wouldn't be that sorry.
No, it's just ultimately not worked out. I think him and Ziyech, if offers came in for Ziyech, I think the club would definitely consider it. Those two for me are the ones that are probably most likely to move on. Ziyech and Ziyech and Pulisic, Ziyech and Werner were out, and say a Dembele and a Gabriel Jesus came in as replacements. I'd be all for that that swap, as it were. And that kind of takes us on to the incomings, Ollie. We've kind of been linked. I want to start with two players. Well, we've got three to go through, really, three main ones. Let's start with Ousmane Dembele. Again, no real update on him. Nothing's agreed between him and Chelsea at all. Fabrizio Romano confirming that, despite the mixed reports out there. Some people saying it's done deal. Some saying, Chelsea are in advanced position to sign him. I think we are in a position where we'd be one of the favourites to sign him, but to suggest that anything's done is untrue. Still wait. He's got an offer on the table from Barcelona. Barca are saying that that's their final offer. They're not going to change it. Dembele's waiting to hear from Barcelona if that is 100% the case. So there's a chance that he could still stay there. I mean, Ollie, on a free transfer, the guy's got obviously bags of ability. He's a good age. Tuchel's worked with him before, very talented. He's both footed as well, like equally good with both feet, which I don't think people understand how rare that is in a player and how important that is, because he can play either side. He could be equally as good off the right, equally as good off the left. I mean, Ollie, for you, if he doesn't want to renew at Barcelona, I know he's got a questionable injury record. He doesn't score a lot of goals, but he's very much a provider. This is one where I think we need to make sure we're at the front of the queue and just get this done. If he signals that he definitely doesn't want to stay at Barca, because for me, on a free transfer, it's almost risk-free.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It certainly seems like that, doesn't it? And I'm not even sure if Barcelona could really afford a better deal than they've offered him. I think it's more than likely he's going to come to us. I think that's the key thing, is the injury record. I think he's a monster signing if he stays fit, because like you say, being that two-footed is just absolutely, it's just such a rarity, and it really is so good. He can cut in from the left or the right, go down the byline on his left or his right foot. He's equally good at both wings, which is what we need, because our attackers misfire so often that we're going to need someone who can be at least semi-consistent on either wing.
Yeah.
And he's sort of the anti-Ziyech in a way. He's supremely two-footed, whereas Ziyech is probably the most left-footed player I've ever seen. But they're both equally quite good at assisting and things like that. I think if he stays fit, it helps Chelsea go up a level. It really does, especially because he's got a decent record of being a playmaker, at least in the last season or two. And that's really what Chelsea need at the moment. And if anyone can coach him back into his best, it's going to be Tuchel, who he's worked with before, and he coached into a £120 million player before.
Yeah.
So, for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree. It's definitely one that needs to be done. I mean, I'm just going to bring this up quickly. Always good fun in the YouTube comments. If Varner would like to elaborate on why he thinks I'm a fraud, then I'm all for listening to it. But yeah, thanks for tuning in anyway, mate.
Thanks for the views. We appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Don't waste your time. Move on. Yeah, no, thanks, mate. Appreciate your support as always. Other two names we've been linked with a lot, and I think there's a bit more growing into this one. And I wanted to get your thoughts on it, Ollie. Raheem Sterling. Now, he's been a very good player for Manchester City. He's been a very good player at Liverpool. Pep's improved him a lot. He had some very good goal scoring seasons there. Not as important a role for Manchester City this season, really. He's still contributed an enormous amount. He's got 1 year left on his contract. Chelsea interested in him. Obviously, again, another guy that does miss a lot of opportunities, but someone that is an out-and-out winger, and arguably he's better than what we've got, if we're being totally honest. And again, Fabrizio Romano on his podcast today saying that Chelsea are really exploring Raheem Sterling. They're waiting to understand what the potential price tag could be. So 2 questions really for you, Ollie. What do you think is an acceptable amount to pay for Sterling with 1 year left on his deal, 28 years of age? And would it make sense for Chelsea to do this?
Would it make sense? It's hard to know, isn't it? It probably depends on outgoings to a certain degree. He's clearly got Premier League experience, clearly an excellent player. The one thing that I always get a little bit concerned by, though, with Man City is because they create so many chances because of the system they play. And all of their players have slightly inflated stats because of that, in my opinion. And so, is he going to be? Would he do as well? And the same for Gabriel Jesus, who we might come on to in a minute, I think. Yeah. But is it going to be the same level as it is at Man City, where he's got a lot more chances, he's going to be passing the ball around, and a lot more opportunities to get in the box and provide assists and goals? At Chelsea, that's probably a little bit less likely. Prices, probably about 60 million. That's probably what you're looking at in this sort of market now. 60 odd million, I would say, for Sterling. Even though he's only got 1 year left on his contract, he's a Premier League multi-time winner, excellent player, because he's got the credentials and the stats and the minerals to back it up. So why not?
It's definitely one that divides opinion on Chelsea Twitter for sure. I mean, there's no denying his record, but as you say, like, it's very particular set of circumstances playing for Manchester City and playing in a Pep Guardiola system. Like, we do create opportunities, but we don't create as many opportunities as Manchester City do. Now, and Sterling does miss a lot of chances, but because he gets so many chances, he also scores a few goals. I don't think he wouldn't get the same amount of opportunities at Chelsea to score as he would at City, which is always a little bit of a worry. Yes, he's got that Premier League experience. I don't know what he'd be like in a 3-4-3 system. He's very much tends to be someone that plays out wide. And I think at the moment, if Lukaku leaves, for me, we might move away from a traditional 9 and have kind of a interchanging front 3. I'm just a little bit unsure about Sterling's credentials playing as a number 9, as it were, which, again, he may be required to do at some points, which is why we're going to come on to Gabriel Jesus now. A couple of reasons why between the two of them, because it's not going to be both. It will be one or the other, in my opinion. And for me, Jesus, not only age, 25, but also versatility. The fact that he's equally comfortable playing wide as he is playing through the middle. And for me, that is really important for us, because if Lukaku does move on, we haven't really got anyone else to play in the middle. Kai Havertz, for me, yes, he's played at the number 9, but I'm still unconvinced whether he's a long-term solution to being a number 9. Whereas if Jesus comes in, it means Havertz could still continue at 9 and can play on the right-hand side. And we've also got a rotation option there as well to play through the middle if that is required. I mean, what are your thoughts on Jesus? For me, just because of the versatility and age, really, that's kind of nudges me towards him over Sterling, and the fact he'd be a little bit cheaper as well.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because and RD in the chat makes an excellent point. He doesn't really score that many goals.
No.
That's the thing. So he's quite a versatile player, but is he actually an out-and-out attacker that we need to focus our play around? Probably not. I'd be a bit more excited for the likes of Sterling, because I think we probably do play better with a fluid front 3 than with someone up top. Even if you play Havertz in sort of like false 9 or as a 9. You can have the likes of, Mount plays on either wing. If you had Dembele, he could play on either wing. Sterling could probably play on either wing as well, probably right wing though. And, I could certainly see a situation where I think Sterling would probably work better in the team than Jesus. However, for his versatility, I would say he's equally as likely to be signed.
And out of the two, mate, if you were picking, you take Sterling, would you, out of those two?
I would, because like I say, I think I would like to see us with more of a fluid front 3. But that's just me. Jesus just doesn't score enough goals for me. Even in that Man City squad.
Yeah.
We've got enough players who score like 8 goals a season. Or 6 goals a season. We just don't need another one, because eventually all we're going to be doing is rotating the same players who score like every other month. And
I get what you're saying.
It just doesn't work.
No, it's definitely a fair point. But yeah, I mean, Dembele for me, if we can get it done, as a must. And then realistically, between those two, it's kind of a toss-up, really. Just very briefly, we have been linked with a couple of others, like Nkunku, again, who's had a fantastic season at RB Leipzig. But again, I'm a little bit concerned about signing players from the Bundesliga. I mean, I don't know if he's not really, he'd be more of a centre-forward, but he's not really a centre-forward. It's one of those that he'd be similar to Kai Havertz in a sense, where he's not really a centre-forward, but he can do well there. And he's not massively a wide player either. So again, he'd cost big money from Leipzig, so that probably wouldn't happen. So I think attacking-wise, it's very much going to be, for me, it's going to be Dembele and then one of Jesus and Sterling. I mean, would you think that's the most likely outcome?
I could actually just see it being just Dembele attacking
Yeah,
wise. Yeah, like whether we actually did go for Sterling or Jesus would probably depend on the other offers that Man City got for them. Sterling may well end up staying, and I could see Jesus ending up going to somewhere like Arsenal because he's
yeah.
been linked quite a lot with them. So I would say Dembele is a must, and then really I wouldn't waste necessarily money on forward players who may not necessarily fit the system, may not be the exact fit we need. Um, I would focus more on getting a midfield presence and then getting the defense sorted as well.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. I think attack again is if we can do business there, 100% do it. But it's not necessarily a priority, and it's as we said, it's going to very much depend on who goes out will dictate who kind of comes in, really. But yeah, for sure, Dembele, as we've all agreed on, would definitely be the number one priority, mate. Just to round out the midfield options again. We need a holding midfield player. Obviously, we've missed out on Tchouameni. We kind of knew that was going to happen after we fucked up last summer and chose Saul instead. Again, other holding midfield players, long time linked with Declan Rice. Again, not so much materialising on that at the moment. We could see a push for that in the coming weeks potentially, but I still think a deal will be difficult to get done this summer. Again, another player, Ibrahim Sangare, the PSV holding midfield player. He's had a very good season in the Eredivisie, but again, he would cost less money than Declan Rice for sure. But again, unproven in this league, and it's one of those where, all right, he has a great season in the Eredivisie, but how good actually is he? I'm not saying he's terrible, but he'd be very much kind of taking a gamble with that. I mean, where do you stand, Oli, in the midfield situation? Because obviously with 5 subs, it means we can perhaps have a few more players in there. And with the likes of Jorginho and Kante out of contract at the end of next season, potentially one of those will be moved on this summer, maybe both, if certain reports are to be believed. Business does need to be done in midfield. And how important for you is it that we get a holding midfield player? And that seems to be what we're crying out for. And it's the one that kind of all the outlets are saying that, midfield is a priority for Chelsea. Do you see it as a priority as well?
Yeah, I do. It's one of the 2 profiles we need. One is a creative attacker, and which hopefully we're going to be getting in Dembele.
Yeah.
And then the other is definitely a holding midfielder. As much as the defensive signings will be important, it won't be as important, in my opinion, as who we bring in as a holding midfielder. It's an interesting situation because I personally would like Rice. Maybe I'm going to get absolutely slaughtered for that on Twitter, but
no, but I'm the same.
But but like you say, it might be a difficult deal to get done this summer because he's still got a few years left on his contract. I did see reports of saying that West Ham might talk for an offer of around £75 million.
Yeah.
And that's significantly cheaper than actually what everyone expected at the start of the season, where West Ham were saying we value him at 150 million or whatever it was, 120 million.
It was never going to be that much.
And it was never going to be that much. Similarly, Tchouameni actually ended up being a lot more than everybody thought as well, being almost 100 million, I think, 100 million euros, I think, when it worked out after all the add-ons and things like that. So, it's a difficult thing. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. We missed out on Tchouameni. I think it's bad we missed out on him last summer, but not this summer. The difficulty with signing someone like a Bissouma or a Sangare, I mean, beyond Bissouma's issues off the pitch, is that if you sign a player like that, you then have a player on your books who is a fine CDM. But then you don't need a CDM who is of Rice's caliber, and he'll end up going to somewhere like Man United. And you do see reports of, like Man United will probably eventually be in for him when he decides he does want to go somewhere. But we all know that Chelsea's his first choice. It's his boyhood club. It's his, his academy club. And he's best friends with Mason Mount, of course. I would say Chelsea should do what they can to try and make that deal happen this summer. Because otherwise, we're either going to be playing without a proper DM again, or we're going to be playing with a DM who's fine, functional, decent, but not amazing. And that's not what we need. We need a real gem of a player in midfield there. And for Rice personally, I think it's worth the money because he'll be in that midfield for a decade. And he's clearly got the quality, he's clearly got the leadership skills, even though he's so young. I personally, if I could whisper in Todd Bowley's ear, I would tell him to do everything at all costs to get Rice.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd 100% agree on that. I think it's what we need to do. It's the one that kind of Tuchel's identified he wants him. You know, we need to do everything we can to try and get him. And if we can't get him, then I do think we've got capable, cover potentially. But I mean, I guess we do need a second choice just in case. So I think it would be a small issue to go into next season with the same midfield. I know Conor Gallagher's coming back, etc., but he's not a defensive midfield player. So I do think the balance could be an issue there. Just last couple of things to round out, mate, on midfield. Conor Gallagher coming back. Now, obviously, he had a very good spell at Crystal Palace on loan. For me, he'll be looked at in pre-season. Again, kind of undecided what Chelsea would do with him. I'd like to see him get given a go. But for me, if we stick with this three at the back system with the midfield two, the pivot, Gallagher's not going to get the minutes he needs there because he's not a player like Mount who could play in the front three that is predominantly a midfield player. Gallagher's very much kind of like a number 8, as it were. And we don't really have a number 8 in that system. And for me, he wouldn't be that great in a midfield too, and he wouldn't get the minutes that perhaps that he would deserve or that he needs to further develop himself. Do you think Gallagher's future very much depends on whether we play a 2 or a 3?
It's an interesting thing. I think actually what it depends on is Gallagher will play more for Chelsea depending on whether we get a defensive midfielder.
Yeah.
Because if we play in a 3, if we're playing with 3 at the back, then we're going to need a defensive partner to go alongside Gallagher, because you're right, he's not a defensive midfielder. He's more of a box-to-box. He's an 8. So you need one who's going to be defensive in that case and one who has license to roam forward. The one who roams forward will obviously be Gallagher. If you're playing with a 2, then you probably need a DM for defensive issues anyway. And in that case, Gallagher will probably switch to maybe a 4-3-3, maybe a 4-2-2, and then Gallagher's got a lot more license to be able to attack and do what he does best. So I think actually, funnily enough, weirdly enough, Gallagher's future at Chelsea and which I think he will have a future at Chelsea, but I think the level of success that he actually sees at Chelsea, at least this season, actually depends on if we get a capable defensive midfielder this summer.
Yeah, no, mate, I would 100% agree with that. In terms of kind of the outgoings in midfield, obviously Ross Barkley, and that's going to move on. We don't need to talk about him. Would you keep Ruben Loftus-Cheek, particularly with five subs as well for next season? And the fact that Ruben's actually shown himself very capable this year on a handful of occasions. He's shown versatility. He's played as a lone 6 in a 3-man midfield. He's played in a pivot and a 2. He's played right wing back to varying success as well. For me, I think he's worth keeping about.
He even played further up top as well, as a big physical presence near at the top. It's difficult because Loftus-Cheek is a player that we're all very quite emotionally attached to because of how good we knew he could be, and and injuries have really, really damaged his career, as it were, at Chelsea, and he's not gotten the opportunity since. He's had poor loans, things like that. I think it would depend. I think if a good offer comes in for him, I would see us probably accepting it. There's a lot of talk all the time. It happens every couple months about him possibly going to meet up with Sarri at Lazio.
Yeah.
And I could see that definitely working. And I think he would absolutely explode out there into the player we all know he could be. But like you say, he's a very versatile player. He can play right wing back. He can play pivot. He can play in a pivot, however poorly. He can play as a more advanced runner of the ball. He's a very good dribbler of the ball as well. He's very good at getting himself out of sticky situations, a bit like Kovacic is. So I think it depends. It depends on if a good offer comes in for him. I think I wouldn't accept anything less than 30 million. I wouldn't say, and I know that sounds like quite a lot to some people, but I think, in this day and age where you're paying 50, 60 million for players who might not always actually be starters in the team, that's probably a reasonable price.
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely worth keeping about. Obviously, if an offer came in, I think the club would definitely think about it. But for me, with 5 subs, we're unsure about the future of Jorginho Kounde. We don't know actually necessarily if a holding midfield player is going to come in. I think it would be worth keeping Ruben around definitely until we know if anyone's going to be coming in or not.
Yeah, generally speaking, with all players, I think it'd be fair to say, I think it's more important to actually hold on and not get rid of players who we don't need to get rid of, especially considering that we're having a bit of a rebuild, a bit of a reshuffle.
Yeah, no, mate, I'd 100% agree. And just last thing, mate, on obviously N'Golo Kante and Jorginho, both out of contract. Tuchel very much wants Kante to be offered a new deal. Kante is always injured at the moment. I think that the decline has been clear for the last 18 months or so. Yes, he's done very well in the Champions League run, but week in, week out in the Premier League, the performance levels have just not been there. Once every few games he'll be decent, and then doesn't really do anything. He's picking up a lot of injuries, injured again on international duty just now in the Nations League. He'd have to, for me, if Kante's going to stay, he needs to take a massive pay cut, and he'd have to accept that he'd be a squad rotation option for me, because he's at the age now where, and the stage in his career where, unfortunately, he's not a shoo-in to start anymore for Chelsea for me.
I think he's still got a lot to give. I think he's an excellent player, and I think the problem is for Kante is nobody knows how to manage him properly, because he's so fit when he is fit. Every manager who plays him just runs him into the ground. We saw it with Conte, we saw it with Sarri, we saw it with Lampard. Now we're seeing it with Tuchel as well. What Kante needs is a break. That, in my opinion, and then. I think he deserves an extension on his contract at Chelsea. I really do. Not least of all because of everything he's done for us. He's an excellent player. On his day. If we if I were making the rules, I would say part of a stipulation of that contract is he needs to take like 2 months off, and just let his body heal. And when he comes back, he'll be completely back to his best. Because a fit Kante, as we all know, is at least 1.5 players, if not 2. And nobody does what he does better than him on a football pitch at the moment. If I were in their position, I would probably do everything to make sure he gets the rest he needs and also gets the extension he deserves.
Yeah, no, I think out of the two, he's definitely worth keeping. Offer him a 1-year extension, keep him about for another year. But again, if an offer comes in and he wants to move on, then I don't have an issue with him going per se. But on Jorginho, Oli, do you think it's time for him to move on? Always linked with a return to Serie A. His agent always talks about it. He's another one that's obviously had a phenomenal season a couple seasons ago, where he won the Euros, kind of third in the Ballon d'Or, etc. They didn't quite reach the heights of that this season just gone. But I still think he's got a lot to offer as well. But I mean, I can't see the club extending both of them, particularly with the likes of Gilmour has been extended by a further year. Gallagher coming back, they've got Loftus-Cheek, so another one might come in. Do you think that if out of those two, it probably is going to be Jorginho that moves on this summer?
I think it's more likely than Kante, I must say, and I'm not really that sad about the prospect of it. Jorginho's an excellent player on his day, world class on his day. Don't get me wrong, but he's been pining for a move back to Italy for a long time. Sometimes in the system that we play, he can be quite limited, and he needs protecting. Which is part of the reason why I think that we do play 3 at the back in the first place, is to have Jorginho do what he does without, if he loses the ball, getting punished for it, which when he plays in a back 4, we see does happen. It's an interesting one. I personally, if an offer came in this summer, I would go for it. It would have to be half decent. 50 odd million maybe. Back to Italy, maybe with Juventus. They've always been snooping around him. I would much prefer him than Kante, I'd say.
Yeah, no, for sure, mate. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. A lot of players need to come in. Obviously, no deals as of yet for Chelsea, but hopefully this week, next week, as we creep further towards pre-season, we'll start to see things speeding up. Hopefully, some bids going in. Hopefully, some deals being completed. We don't want to get left behind, and we want something to kind of be excited about as fans in the off season, particularly with nothing too much going on. So do stay tuned for kind of what's going to be happening. It seems like a good point to round out. Oli, thank you so much for your time, mate. Pleasure as always. Always great to chat all things Chelsea with you. Guys, make sure you check Oli out on Twitter. I've linked them both in the description. Mate, are you starting a podcast as well? When's that going to be knocking about?
Well, I'm going to be starting a podcast soon. It's called the Carefree Podcast. I'll happily have you on it whenever I have the
love to do that. Yeah.
I'm just currently making I'm creating a bit of a backlog first before I start releasing them in case I need to keep because I want to stay consistent. And I'd really like to. I'd like everyone to listen to it. So check me out on Twitter at Oli Carpenter, because big things are coming. And also subscribe to Charlie as well, because he's got a great thing going on over here. He really deserves more subscribers.
I'm a fraud as well, so that definitely deserves
Massive
a subscription.
fraud.
Massive
Biggest
fraud.
Best fraud I know.
But yeah, guys, this is a good place to round out. Thanks so much for getting involved in the chat. Really appreciate all of your thoughts and input. Make sure you smash a like on the stream. Please do click that subscribe button. We're over 500 now, so we're on the road to a K. So help me get there. Spread the word. Do your thing. Every subscriber helps, so just click that button. It really helps me. And I'll be back on Thursday, being a fraud again, discussing the Premier League fixtures and to see what Chelsea's fixtures for the coming season will be like. So until then, guys, take care, keep the faith, and up the Chels.